This is a disclaimer. This episode may contain graphic descriptions of crime and criminal activity. It may not be suitable for listeners under the age of 18 or for those who may find the descriptions disturbing. Listeners' discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to another episode of Krime KE podcast. My good name is Ajuma and I am very grateful that you took the time to listen in today. Now, in today's episode, we will talk about the murder of Mary Wambui. Wambui was a businesswoman and a mother. Her death in January of 2019 made a lot of headlines, and the details of how she ended up dead are both shocking and heartbreaking. And now, without further ado, let us get into today's episode, and please stick around until the end of this episode to find out how you can support this podcast. On the night of Saturday, 26th January 2019, Joseph Corey got home from work in Ngong to find his wife Mary Wambui missing. Although they had had disagreements, he still expected to find her at home because they had not separated and they were still living together at their apartment in Safari Park Estate. Now, Corey sent Wambui a text message saying, "Have fun and don't come back home," which is a weird reaction, but I guess they were in the middle of a fight, so he assumed that she had just chosen not to come back home. He then retired for the night, still not knowing her whereabouts. But that changed the next morning. According to Corey's statement, he was casually browsing social media on that Sunday morning when he came across a post on Facebook that was saying that a woman's body had been found dumped at Mugudha Dam in the Juja area. As he continued to read the post, he realized that the woman was described as having been wearing the same clothes that Wambui had on when she sent him photos earlier the previous day. So he immediately got in his car and headed to the dam to see whether it was his wife. He was hoping that he was wrong, but he could not just ignore it since he had not spoken to his wife since the previous day. On reaching the area, he found out that the murdered woman was actually Wambui. There was a crowd of people and the police were trying to gather evidence from the crime scene. When he informed them that he was the victim's husband, the police immediately took him into custody for questioning. At this point, Corey was confused as to how Wambui ended up murdered and dumped in Juja and why. He told the police that when Wambui sent him photos on Saturday, she was not alone. She was with a woman identified as Judy Wangoi Mungai, and that was the last known person to be seen with her alive. And Corey knew Judy very, very well. Now, how did he know Judy and how did we end up here? Let me take you back to the beginning. Wambui and Corey were married in 2008, but this was not Corey's first marriage. It is reported that they had an affair while Corey was still in his first marriage. The affair led to the breakdown of the first relationship, and he left that relationship and got into a relationship with Wambui. They had a very tumultuous relationship, mostly because of Corey's wandering eye, but they stayed together for that long, so I guess they still had love for each other. Now, in 2017, Corey met Judy Wangoi. At the time, Judy Wangoi was working at a car wash in Tindigua, and Corey was a very regular customer at the place. Judy at the time was a single mother and she was in between jobs, just basically working any job that would help her provide for her and her child. Now, when she met Corey, she was able to relax because he seemed to provide her with everything that she needed. He rented her an apartment and even gifted her a car, a Mercedes, similar to the one his wife Wambui was driving. Now, the thing is, when Judy found out that Corey was a married man, she did not leave him. She decided to open a pseudo account on Facebook and she started posting photos of herself and Corey, knowing very well that his wife Wambui would see them. Now, of course, Wambui saw them and it bothered her, but her relationship with Corey was not the rosiest because, again, Corey had a wandering eye. After 3 years, in January of 2019, Judy and Corey broke up, and he chose to focus on his marriage with Wambui. But Judy could not let him go. She apparently became obsessed, following and stalking Corey and his family. Now, according to the police investigation and analysis of her movements on the 25th of January 2019, the stalking led Judy to Corey and Wambui's house in Safari Park Estate on that day. So she came back the next day on Saturday 26th, and at around 10 a.m. she knocked on their door. At the time, only Wambui and her 6-year-old son were home. Now, I don't know what kind of conversation was had when Wambui opened the door and saw her husband's mistress standing there, but they all ended up agreeing to go and hang out at a restaurant. So Wambui got ready and the three of them left for a lunch date at a restaurant along Thika Road. Now, I wanted to remember this. When Judy went to Wambui's house, she was driving a hired car. So as they were heading out to lunch, she was driving her hired car and Wambui was driving her Mercedes. They sat down for lunch and by all accounts, the mood was light. Witnesses say that the two were chatting very comfortably at the restaurant and there were no signs of tension. At this moment, this is the time when Wambui takes photos of her with Judy and she sends the photos to Corey. So now back to Corey. He has been arrested on suspicion of involvement in Wambui's murder. He tells the police that he has nothing to do with Wambui's death, and he explains to them that she sent him photos with Judy the previous day. So he brought the police to Judy's apartment where they found Wambui's blood-stained clothes, and this is where the investigation just begins to unravel. Judy was immediately taken into custody and she was arrested with one Michael Githai Madenge. Madenge was running a car hire business and she was responsible for leasing the vehicle that Judy used on the day that she went to meet Wambui. Madenge was arrested after investigators discovered that he had been in contact with Judy and was even with her on the day and time that Wambui disappeared. Corey was cleared of suspicion after investigators analyzed his phone data and confirmed his alibi. The evidence showed that he had no involvement in the murder and he hadn't been near the crime scene in recent days. Now, Wambui's postmortem showed that she had suffered internal bleeding to the brain after she was hit 9 times with a blunt object, possibly the back of a gun. It was also determined that she had cuts on her forehead and defensive wounds on her arms. That meant that she tried to fight for her life. Now, after Corey's release, Madenge and Judy became the main suspects in Wambui's murder, and they were arraigned and charged with her murder. Judy was the first accused and Madenge was the second accused. Now, Judy was described as uncooperative by the police. She stuck to her story that she had nothing to do with Wambui's murder and she pleaded not guilty to the charges. At some point, she actually told the police that it was Corey who had murdered Wambui and he had promised to give her 2 million Kenya shillings if she kept quiet about it. This sounded untrue to the police because the evidence they had at this point and the fact that they had already determined that Corey could not have committed the murder. So this whole story just sounded false to the police. Now, unlike Judy, Madenge actually confessed to his role in the murder. According to court documents, he pleaded guilty and told the police his version of what happened. He said that he had known Judy for at least 2 years, and on that Saturday morning, she called him to tell him that she had a job for him later that day. He did not know what the job was, but he agreed to take it. So after the lunch date, Wambui and Judy ended up at Four Ways Estate that evening. I don't know why and how, but they drove to the estate in Wambui's Mercedes and they left the hired car at the restaurant. When they got to the apartment, Wambui was shocked to find pictures of her husband, Corey, hanging on the wall. And she even realized that the furniture in the house matched the furniture they had in their house at Safari Park Estate. At this point, she knew she was in enemy territory. The two of them started arguing, and it was something about the logbook to the Mercedes that Corey had bought for Judy. Wambui wanted Judy to give her the logbook for the car, but Judy refused. The argument turned into a physical fight, and at some point, they even fought over a knife that Judy wanted to use to stab Wambui. Now, after failing in her attempt to stab Wambui, Judy apparently went into the kitchen and picked up a pressure cooker. And that is what she used to hit Wambui on the head before suffocating her to death as she screamed for help. Wambui died at around 8:20 p.m. on Saturday, after which Judy wrapped her body in bedsheets and placed it in the kitchen. According to CCTV footage from the apartment, Judy can be seen leaving around an hour later in Wambui's car. It was reported that she went back to the restaurant that they had been earlier to pick up her vehicle, the hired one. Now, I don't know what the security protocols were at the restaurant, but the security officers there refused to let her leave in the car. So what she did was she parked Wambui's car just behind the restaurant and took a taxi back to her house. Now, CCTV footage showed her arriving at her apartment at around 11 p.m. and that is when Madenge received the call from Judy. According to court testimony from Madenge, Judy called him to her apartment at Four Ways Estates that night, and when he got there, she told him to help him dispose of Mary Wambui's body. At first, they went back to the restaurant to try and get the car again, because remember, Madenge was the one who had hired it to her. But again, the security guards refused to let them live with it. So what Judy did was she went and took Wambui's car from where she had parked it earlier, and the CCTV footage shows both of them arriving back at Four Ways Estate at around 1:30 a.m. They had agreed that they would take Wambui's body to Mugudha Dam, passing through the Kiambu Kamiti Road. So at the apartment, they put Wambui's body in the back of her car and they started driving towards Juja. Judy was driving in Wambui's car with the body and Madenge was following behind her in his own car. On the way, they were stopped by the police, but apparently only Madenge's car was searched, so they got a lucky escape because police did not find anything. They got to the dam and dumped Wambui's body. After that, they drove to Gitamba in Roiro, where they dumped the beddings used to wrap Wambui's body and the baby car seat in her car. After Roiro, they drove to Githunguri, where they disposed of a blood-stained carpet from Judy's house. From there, they drove to Komaiko, where Judy abandoned Wambui's car and got into Madenge's vehicle, and he drove them back to Four Ways Estate. At this point, Judy and Madenge, they think they have cleared up everything. They have cleaned the crime scene and disposed of everything that police might try to find. And Madenge actually took the police to the place where they dumped everything after he confessed to the crime. Now, the investigation determined that their movements that night were consistent with both the physical evidence and Madenge's confession, which confirmed the sequence of events. Madenge told the police that Judy allegedly threatened to tell the police that he murdered Wambui, and that is why he agreed to help her. He was arraigned in February of 2019, but he remained in custody until June of the same year when he was released on bond. Now, according to court documents, his lawyer informed the court that since he had confessed and assisted the police with the investigation, they should consider giving him a lighter sentence. He entered into a plea agreement with the Director of Public Prosecutions, and he pleaded guilty to accessory to murder. On the 16th of November 2021, he was sentenced to 1 year in prison, considering everything, his confession and his cooperation with the police. Now, that is as far as it goes for Madenge's part of the case. Now, at this stage, Judy's side of the case still remains unclear. There has been no follow-up reporting or accessible records to show how things unfolded for her. If she's convicted, there might be a possibility of getting the death penalty, actually. Wambui was laid to rest at her husband's home in Muiga, Nyeri County on 2nd March 2019, and her family described her as a kind and generous person. We have come to the end of this episode. That is all I have for you on the story of the brutal murder of Mary Wambui Kamangara. I have not found any information indicating whether there was a resolution to this case, so I will continue to monitor the situation. If and when I do find something, you will see it on our social media platforms. You can support Krime KE podcast by sharing this episode with your friends so that we can get a larger community to listen to these cases. I have also tagged the podcast contact information and social media pages on the show notes of this episode so that it is easier for you to reach out if you have any feedback on this episode or the podcast in general. You can also use the same information to suggest crime cases that you would want to hear on the podcast, and I will get to them. Now, with all that said and done, don't forget to give this podcast a 5-star rating on Spotify and catch the next episode of Crime KE podcast on Thursday next week. But until then, stay safe and remember, it is crime with a K.